Tonight on Chimps Talk Africa, my guest is Muyiwa Olarenwanju, a Nigerian British gospel singer and songwriter whose decades of contribution in the area of music and broadcasting recently earned him an appointment by the Queen of England as the officer of the Order of the British Empire, OBE. Tonight he shares about the beginnings as a traumatized teenager, an immigrant in the UK, to a place of influence in the country. Tonight on Chimps Talk Africa.
From Cape Town to Cairo and from Mogadishu to Dakar, this is Chimps Talk Africa. And now here's your host, Chim Onyibilanma.
Hi there, welcome to this week's episode of your show. Like I said in the introduction, my guest today is a man who is making waves for Christ in the UK. Muyiwa Olarenwanju is a gospel singer, songwriter, and a broadcaster. Some of you might know him as the host of the show on CBN called Turning Point, which is watched all across the world. But tonight he comes to share with me the story of his life. And I want us to go straight into that. Muyiwa, thank you so much for joining me via Zoom from the UK. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, along with Jesus came your discovery of the gospel music in the church. And that's changed the trajectory of your life. Music has become your life now. Tell us about encountering gospel music and your journey with music over the years.
You know, just as you're talking, just going back in my mind, and it's the emotions just overwhelm you because they were. I mean, I was an average middle class kid from Nigeria. My life hitherto had been cushioned with, private schooling. Being shielded from the vicissitudes of life by parents, so you couldn't go anywhere. I mean, I wasn't the kind of kid that could go anywhere and all that. So I didn't know anything about life. So the first slap I would get from life was coming to London, and I remember clearly getting off the plane. The cold hit me upside the head. I'd never experienced that before. And I remember sitting on the tube with my sisters. One of them was here already. One came with me. And I remember seeing some kids, white kids, they were on the train, and they were being boisterous, and one was standing up. So they were older kids. And from where I come from, older people don't stand whilst a younger child sits. So I get up for one of them to sit down. And my sister drags me down forcefully and sits down. She says to me, "They'll think you're afraid of them." This was confusing to me. I couldn't understand what. Of course, now I know what that was. So that was the start. And then we get to my uncle's house, and his first word to me that I remember, and he said it in my native language, Yoruba. Otide, which means. Oh, you've arrived. You're going to suffer, and those words fulfill themselves in my life, because from there on, it was a struggle. It was a struggle of an immigrant in a strange country, with all the brokenness that comes with that, and the human experiences that you have in between, and then the bitterness that builds up when you're asking yourself the question, why would my parents do this? But now, being a father myself, I understand the pain that my parents themselves must have felt in their first son being ripped away from them. And so economically it was difficult, emotionally it was torturous, culturally it was a confusion, because I was socialized in a different environment. and now I'm in this environment, and I couldn't understand what was going on. Much of what I now understand to be both my cultural displacement and racism. I mean, I remember my next door neighbor then. I was just, I mean, would say hello every now and then, and I was outside playing with this young lady. She was about my age, from next door, and I said, "So, would you be my friend?" And I didn't even pay attention that she was distraught. She runs in. A little while later, her brother comes out with his cousin, and they had knives in them. And he says to me, "If you ever try to go out with my sister again," and I'm like, "What's wrong with Terry? This is a Terry I see. I see Terry every day. I mean, he's a bigger boy, but and I liked Terry. I mean, from where we're coming from, or where I was coming from, we had no such issues. We loved everyone. And at that point, I realized I was different, and I realized the intolerance for me and what I represented as a boy. And imagine all that in the teenagers. Already my hormones are crazy because I'm a teenager. So I'm walking a walking ball of anger, confusion, and then my displacement adds to that. The economic circumstance adds. It was a mess. Thank God for Jesus, because I would have been, whew, Jesus.
Muyiwa, let's talk about Jesus. Anybody who knew you then as that struggling teenager, those early days, would have predicted that you end up in drugs or maybe in some form of crime. But nobody would have imagined that you'd be in a place where you are being honored by the Queen today. But it all happened because of your encounter with Jesus. How did you encounter Jesus?
So my encounter with Jesus, I have to say, started early. My submission to a relationship with him came later. I mean, I say it started early because for most of us who come from where I come from, which is Nigeria, we have some sort of consciousness of God, and whether you're polytheistic, whether you have a consciousness of God, and so I grew up in the Church of England, Anglican Church. I grew up knowing about prayer. I grew up knowing about Bible reading, about Psalms. And so when I arrived here, that was a part of my makeup. But because of my circumstances, I was not in any community, as it were. And so after a while, I stumbled, and I'll hop around on this story. I stumbled into a community of Christians. There was a young man who I known from when I was younger in Nigeria. His name was Wale. He was a bit of a lad, a guy's guy. Everyone knew him and loved him, party animal type. So when I bumped into him in this country, I was like, "Woo, someone I know, an older person who I know, who I aspire to be like." And so he says to me one day, says, "Listen, come with me. There's this church I know where there are loads of girls." So again, I'm a teenager. And I'm just looking for identity. I'm looking for belonging. So of course I go with him, and I go to the church. It's the Apostolic Church. This is where I bump into Pentecostalism, and I see young people who they're singing. Why do you see people singing and clapping and jumping? But they look like me. They I feel like one of them, even though I wasn't one of them. And over time, I got involved. We'll go. And I gave my life to Christ. And I remember the day, it was the Monday, the Easter Monday. It hit me, and I thought, and this is a conversation I have with myself. I said, Jesus, if this Jesus thing is real. So I said, "Jesus, if you are real, please come into my heart." I prayed the prayer. And the preacher then does his thing, say, "If you prayed, come out." Now, I then went out in the end. But the reality of my submitting to Jesus and asking Jesus to come into my life was, whilst I was doing it, I was worried that my feet smelled and that everybody could smell my feet.
Muyiwa, there will be a lot of young people and even older people who feel called to the music ministry listening to us now, and they're praying for a breakthrough. They're praying for a break to be able to, flourish. At what point did you experience that breakthrough in your ministry that got you to where you are today? How did it happen?
I think, well, for me, I have to say, it'd be difficult for me to say because I don't have a global view on things. But from the vista I have, which is limited, where it happened was, and I call it my "it just happened" moment. It just happened that I'd sent the album to Premier Radio, and Pastor, for anyone, any young person who's listening. I would borrow the words of our current vice president in Nigeria when he said, "Farabale." That's colloquialism for just relax, slow down, baby. You're going too fast, as Inda Ari might say, because our proclivities to try and make stuff happen. And in this day and age of social media and instant gratification, you want to make stuff happen. But actually, if God has called you, relax, because for me, I wasn't trying to push. When you talk about CBN, Turning Point, CBN say, is watched by 70 million people a week. I had the joy of taking over from Victor Oladokun 11 years ago now. Now, how did I end up on that? Now, of course, once that happened, it just blew up some more in terms of visibility. That happened because whilst I was at Premier, I worked as though it was my father's station. People here at Premier will be like, "No, I'm not doing it. It's not my job." I'll be like, "I'll do it." So I went from doing one show, and it wasn't because I wanted to be popular. I was just like, I came from a culture where my parents, it's can do, if there's a job, get it done. Don't lark about. So I went from being offered one show to end up doing 2 shows and 3 shows. So you were hearing me on Premier Radio from 7 p.m. at night to 1 a.m. in the morning, every single day of the week. But when I would come on naturally, I'm proudly Nigerian. I'm a British man, but I make no apologies for being Nigerian because I don't think God made a mistake. So I would come on the radio and I would start the shows by saying, "Hi, it's Muyiwa Olarenwanju Shalom Orintunjogunla," and I'll fall out laughing because I knew people were going, "Huh? What's that?" It happened that there was a lady listening who called her brother-in-law and says, "There's this Nigerian kid on Premier, and every time he comes and he says his whole name, that man starts listening from the States." And it just happened that the same man is Victor Oladokun. And just the number of things that happened meant he now started listening, thinking, "Who is this Nigerian kid?" Discovers that I do music, invites me over to America to guest on Turning Point. 7 years later, after he's left Turning Point, they're looking for a new presenter. They say, "Oh, let's try that guy in London, Muyiwa." Now, there's a whole bunch of people in America that they could use for the program.
Yeah.
But they reach all the way to London. And I think for someone who's listening, just be faithful where you are. Don't be perfect. Just be faithful. Do it, because I see it a lot now. Cats be doing stuff so that they can catch the pastor's eye or catch the investor's eye. And that may be cool for you, but do it first to catch God's eye. So Pastor, you have me rambling on and on and on at this point.
No, you're not rambling. Listen, I'm just listening as I am intently because you're speaking the truth. The fact is that I always say for those of us in ministry, there is a serious occupational hazard because sometimes in the bid of focusing on growing the ministry, we don't continually grow our relationship with Jesus. Our primary call as ministers is to gaze on Jesus, is to sit at his feet. We must never read the Bible so as to preach to people. First of all, we must read the Bible first of all to listen to God and let God feed our life, shape our life, chisel our life. And it's not something you graduate from. It's something you continue till the very end. It's in that place of gazing, of abiding. That's where ministry comes from. Our ministry must always proceed from our intimacy with Christ. If it doesn't flow out from there, then we'll dry up. In fact, we'll begin to make mistakes and we will end in a shipwreck. So you are speaking the truth and the things you've said, and I really appreciate that you can say those things. Muyiwa, if you were to go back and speak to young Muyiwa many years ago, when you were just starting off in the music ministry, what advice would you give to yourself back then?
By the way, on the question of what I would tell my younger self, one of the things I'll tell my younger self is, listen, when you find out about Bitcoin, don't sell too early. Hold on to it.
Did you sell early?
Oh, Pastor Chi.
Let's not go into that.
I sold way too early. I bought Bitcoin when it was still $50 a Bitcoin. And I sold when it was like $200 a Bitcoin. I didn't have prophetic foresight at all. But anyhow, so I would.
Now tell me, what has been your biggest challenge in ministry?
I would say the biggest challenge, there've been many challenges. I don't know whether one can be the biggest, but I think one of the ones that I struggle with, and I still wrestle with it, is found in the book of Hebrews, that he that comes to God must first believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. It's something I'm teaching my children at the moment. First, that God is. And I think, Pastor, honestly, I've been around, not as long in ministry as you have, but I've been around with some of the great names that we celebrate, whether in the Pentecostal movement or the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church. And I realize there are many men and women who are in the cloth, who are in the religion, in the movement, whatever you want to call it, who don't really believe that God is, but they can't get out because this is how they fuel their lifestyle. So for me, it's knowing that he is, and as you go along, I don't think we finally get to a place where we know without any, because there's always something that comes to question whether you know. Many of our bishops wouldn't admit that, but the reality is, except they were greater than Elijah and Elisha and Job, there is always a question that comes along to ask, is God really what he said he is? And for me, I think that's been, even just today, and I was having a conversation with a brother of mine because I called him because there was some burdens on my chest, and I opened up to him, and at the heart of it, he said to me, but you do realize that God is able. And it hit me. And we say all the time, God is able. So the biggest challenge for me has been that. And why has it been a challenge? Partly because I decided I would not play the game of ministry. And there's a game of ministry that people play. Some of the big artists you would see, and I've been in spaces where the game is played out. So you've just invited us to your conference, and everyone knows, okay, your conference has 100,000 people come to. Actually, Carlton Pearson, he pulls back the veil on that whole thing. Bishop Carlton Pearson, who walked away from the faith somewhat, he pulls back the veil on it, and this is where the game comes in. So, Pastor Chi, your conference, you've invited us. I know your conference will have people come to it. So I will make a beeline for you and say whatever I need you to hear in order for you to book me so I could be on your conference. I will put up with all sorts of nonsense. I would watch you do hideous things, but will turn my eye because I'm after that paycheck and that payday. And people don't realize a lot of ministers do that, you see, and put up with that. But from very early on, I realized I wasn't called to that. And that's cost me a great number of things, big stages that I could be on. But I also realized that actually, thank God, I wasn't called by big stages. I'm trying to stay faithful to He who called me, because I'm persuaded that He's able. And just God has been kind, because we're here. I mean, the Queen's acknowledged and all these things. But if I had acquiesced to the noise of my imperfections and the annoying noise of the questions, is God really able? I would have joined in the treadmill of the games. I mean, there's a certain artist he's very well celebrated at the moment, and his song, when it comes out, it hits. Everyone's on fire on it. One of my journalists wrote a piece. I asked her to write the piece celebrating the artist. Within an hour of the piece going up, she got messages from people in India saying, listen, thank you wrote this piece about this artist. We'd like you to write some more, and we've got money for you for writing some more. And if you know anything about that world, you quickly realize that that artist's machinery is put in place things to amplify their work. And it's not always super clean, you see, but just amplify the work. So, and those are some of the things people employ. So when the average person is looking at it, oh my goodness, this person's so anointed. Can you imagine their song came out and 1 million people in 2 days have sang the song? You don't realize the machinations of the things going on behind it. And God still is glorified. But the problem is, on the day of judgment, sadly, what you might hear for some of the people you were dancing around was, depart from me, you evildoer, I never knew you. And then it will be, but did I not prophesy in your name? You know, the hit song I had, people were healed to it, saved, delivered to it. And the master would say, depart from me, you evildoer. So my challenge is being to know that He is, and as much as I can, stay true to what He's called me to, and not get drawn in to the mess of industry, which is real, more so in Christendom than anywhere else.
Now, Muyiwa, we have to round up. We've gone on for so long. What would be your last word? Maybe something you had in your mind to say, you've not been able to say as we round up.
You know, Pastor, there's so much to say, but right now, I think one of the things I would say is for someone who feels like a word that they've been given, because we believe in the word, we believe in the prophetic word, we believe God still speaks, and He will speak to your situation, that you have a word and it seems as though it's not happening. I would say, be steadfast, be unmovable, because there'll be reason for you to move. Always abiding. Again, that's that thing you said. Keep looking in His face, even when it seems like it's not possible. Listen, the promise God gave my mother, Muyiwa Olarenwanju, I'm living it now, even though my mother died in a car crash on the mission field. My father was assassinated for doing the work of the ministry. They told him, if you carry on, we will kill you. And his position, and they told me from when I was young, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. So the very things that God spoke to them, they didn't get to see. I'm living it now. So God is faithful to His word. Because you may hear the preacher again and again, it's around the corner. You'd be like, Lord, how big is this corner? Listen, believe that He is, and He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. So be diligent in your seeking. Believe His word. The award from Her Majesty the Queen, 6 years before it was spoken, I totally forgot about it. But God's word was true. So much so that the when it happened, there were now prophets claiming that, oh yeah, I prophesied it to Muyiwa. And I'm like, man, you didn't. Someone sent me a text 6 years before. So I'm saying to you, please hold on. Don't throw your confidence in God away because it seemed like it's a long time, because he's doing something. He is faithful. He's a God of faithfulness without injustice. So that's one thing I want to leave you with. Whatever it's a promise about a child, a promise about ministry, a promise about healing, whatever it is, be steadfast, be immovable, hold your ground where you are, and always abound in God and in his good works. Keep looking in his face, and be resolute that even if you don't do it, God, I'm still going to love you, because you are just too good to be true.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I've been talking to Muyiwa Olarenwanju, singer, songwriter, and broadcaster, who was recently honored by the Queen of England with the award of Officer of the British Empire. Thank you so much, Muyiwa, for joining me on the show today. Thank you. Hi there, welcome back. This is where we round up for this week. I'm sure you have been challenged and blessed by the story of brother Muyiwa Olarenwanju. You can access his music online on the different platforms you have. Wonderful music over the years that has blessed so many people. And you can watch him on the show, which also shows on some of these channels. It's called Turning Point. He's the host of that CBN show. So you can catch that on your local station. And this is where we say bye-bye to you. I just want to encourage you that this show and this ministry we do continues because of people like you who believe in what we are doing to challenge Christians to be salt and light, and they give to us. Perhaps you want to prayerfully consider becoming a partner with us. Any gift of yours will be highly appreciated. Use the contact on your screen to contact us today to let us know you want to give. And in return, I want to say thank you to you by sending you a copy of my book, God Gives His Children a Song. This is a book that has blessed so many people around the world, and we want to say thank you to you by sending it to you to bless you. I'll see you same station, same time next week. This is where I'll say bye-bye. Bye. Please like this video and leave a comment below. Let's know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell button and share this video with somebody else.